Hello, everyone. I'm Marx. Today, I'd like to talk with you about a very important concept in macroeconomics called the GDP deflator, also known as the GDP price index. It's often compared with the famous consumer price index, or CPI. That's because both of these are indices used to measure changes in prices. So, from the concept of the GDP deflator, you can probably guess that it's mainly used to measure the production in GDP. Okay, because GDP stands for domestic production, which means it's basically a producer price index. Usually, there's a so-called base year. We use the nominal GDP of each year to calculate its real GDP. All right, so how do we calculate the GDP deflator? Actually, it's very simple. We've already given you a very important formula for this below. All we need to do is plug in the numbers, and it's easy to calculate this price. All right, for this index, if you have both the nominal and real GDP for a specific year, it's very easy to calculate the GDP deflator, or the so-called price index for 2020. So real means you just take the nominal, which is 18, divided by the real, which is 16.5, and then multiply by 100. That means for the base year, the GDP deflator is always 100, serving as a benchmark. For later years, like 2020, we can calculate that it's roughly around 109.1. You can easily figure this out with a calculator. Of course, besides 2018, we can also calculate it for 2017, 2016, and so on. If we're talking about years with normal inflation, then for the years before 2018, the GDP deflator should all be less than 100. This logic is very clear. So the most important thing is, how do the GDP deflator and the CPI compare to each other? As we just emphasized together, the GDP deflator mainly measures the producer price index. And as everyone knows, what is not included in GDP? Imports. All imported goods are actually excluded from GDP. They are subtracted. So the GDP deflator is entirely a price index for domestically produced goods. All right, the CPI itself is a completely different concept. What is it? It's a fixed basket of household purchases. In other words, it's the prices of everything in the consumer's consumption basket. Of course, this basket is defined each year. For example, it includes a certain proportion of clothes, a certain proportion of shoes, toothpaste, and so on. Naturally, it also covers all kinds of services like rent, etc. They're all included. So you can easily imagine what it includes, right? That is, imports. This is very important. The prices of imported goods are also included in the CPI. All right, you'll often see something called the core CPI, which is the core consumer price index. Basically, it's just the CPI with the frequently fluctuating prices of food and energy removed. So between these two, it's actually pretty clear. They are two completely different concepts. The so-called GDP deflator refers to the production price, meaning the producer prices of goods produced domestically. Of course, these will keep rising year after year under normal inflation. The CPI, or Consumer Price Index, refers to prices from the consumer's perspective. It's the price index for consumers. So it has nothing to do with producers, and it also includes all imported goods. All right, so to sum up, when we talk about inflation, whose inflation are we really talking about? It mainly depends on whether you're discussing the overall picture from the producer side or all the products and services in the consumer shopping cart. All right, that's all for today. See you next time.